So hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 UK Fellowships webinar for the Goldwater Scholar community. My name is Nina Apostolova, and I am the current chair of the webinars committee for the GSC. And I want to welcome everyone to this wonderful event where we'll get to hear from some past Goldwater scholars about their experiences studying abroad in the UK for graduate programming. We will go ahead and get started with some introductions. So if everyone, panelists, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves briefly, I think that'll be the best way to kick us off. And we can start first with Nicholas.
Okay, I just wanted to wait for your permission. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick. I am an alumni of Goldwater Scholarship. I believe I've received it in 2016, class of 2016. I'm a current Gates Cambridge scholar. I am entering the final year of my PhD, which is a bit daunting. And my primary research interests center around volcanoes, all things volcanoes. I use a variety of different tools to study them. I've applied to quite a few fellowships, Gates being one of them, and I'm also a recipient. Unfortunately, had to decline, but I received a Fulbright scholarship as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nick. Let's move on to Aaron.
Hey everybody, my name is Aaron. I was a 2018 Goldwater Scholar, and ironically enough, I was the one who put this panel together and moderated it 2 years ago. So it's kind of weird being on the other end now, being one of the panelists. But I graduated from the University of Florida in 2020. I'm on the Marshall Scholarship, so I did my first year at the University of Cambridge, studying stem cell biology. It was a research degree. I'm doing my second year at King's College London, doing a taught degree in stem cells and regenerative therapies. And yeah, looking forward to answering all your questions and hopefully helping you guys out.
Thank you, Aaron. Let's move on to Amar.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amar Bardwaj. I'm a 2020 Marshall Scholar and a 2019, I believe, Goldwater Scholar. So I'm in the same year of the Marshall as Aaron. We're actually going to be living in the same flat this year. So excited for that. I did my first year of the Marshall at the University of Edinburgh, doing a kind of energy sociology based master's program. And this year I'm going to do an MPA in energy policy at University College London. So I'm broadly interested in the intersection of energy technology and policy, and obviously the implications for decarbonization. So happy to be here. Looking forward to our conversation and answering any questions you all have.
Right, thank you so much. Let's move on to Zoe.
I was a bit early. Hi, everyone. My name is Zoe. I was a Goldwater Scholar in 2020, so pretty recently. I just graduated this last May from Bowdoin College with degrees in biochem and earth and oceanographic science. I study marine biogeochemistry, so phytoplankton and microbes in the ocean and how they facilitate all those chemical cycles. And actually, in a week and a half, I will be headed to Cambridge to start an MPhil or master's in earth sciences through the Churchill program. So I'm pretty excited for that. And while I unfortunately will not be able to answer any questions about actually being in England, I'm happy to provide a fresh perspective on the application experience.
Wonderful. And we'll move on to Samuel, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam. I did my undergrad at the University of Chicago, and I mastered there at the same time, Master of Science. I majored in chemistry, but I did research in geophysics and climate science. I'm a 2013 Goldwater Scholar. I applied for the Rhodes in 2013, and I was in Oxford from 2014 to 2016. I did master's by research in physical and theoretical chemistry. I then spent a year at Yale before starting with my PhD back at the University of Chicago. But my advisors moved to Columbia, so I'm there now with them doing my PhD in chemical physics. I've also been on the other end of the application process since I've been an interviewer for practice interviews for the Rhodes and Marshall. So I hope that I can offer some useful comments from that side too.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And then we have one more guest joining us tonight. Cody, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. And sorry again that I'm just on phone. Also, Sam, great to hear your voice. So yeah, I was a Goldwater Scholar a million years ago, probably 2011, I think. And then like Sam went on to do the Rhodes in 2015. Now I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Stanford in the intersection of biology and photonics. So I research things like how particular animals absorb nearly 100% of light that impacts them. So things like super black animals. And I also run interviews for the Rhodes Scholarship in China. So I'm excited to offer whatever useful guidance I can. And thanks again for organizing this.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. Now that we have gotten intros into our conversation, I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing here. And I just want us to kind of open things up. This will hopefully be kind of like a roundtable discussion. So I want to just keep things conversational and just very casual. So we'll just go ahead and start off with some very basic intro questions, and then we'll move on to Q&A here in just a bit. So I just wanted to go around and ask you why you chose to pursue graduate school in the UK. And anyone can chime in, but let's go ahead and just start with Aaron.
Okay. So why did I pursue graduate education in the UK? Well, I'd always wanted to do a study abroad, like during undergrad, but I never found time to do it because I'm pre-med. I plan on going to med school after my time in the UK, and I was always I always had things to do and just responsibilities stateside. So I never found time to like study abroad. Like all my other friends got to go to these great places like Australia and like Europe, Africa, all over the place. So I was kind of jealous. I figured out then the gap between undergrad and med school would be a good time. And I could also like explore some of my interests that I might not be able to explore during med school, which is a little more restrictive sometimes. So that was the main reason. Really wanted to experience a different culture. I was actually born and raised in Florida, then I attended undergrad in Florida, so I don't get much out of Florida. So I thought it was a good opportunity to branch out. So that was mainly my reasons. And of course, like at least in my field, stem cell biology, the science in the UK is like world class. So I didn't see there's like no downsides to just shooting an application out and hoping to get one of these scholarships.
I would say for me, one of the Nick, I'll let you go to once I finish. Sorry. One of the reasons that kind of has become more prominent to me in the time that I've actually been on this scholarship has been that I think all of these UK fellowships offer a really valuable and unique opportunity to take a year or two of having some time to reflect on yourself, focus on learning, and kind of not feel like you're being strung along by some momentum that you have in your career path towards what's next and what's coming in the future. I feel like the time on the scholarship in the past year, and I expect for the next year, has been a really great chance for me to take a little bit of a breather and think to myself about the direction that I want to go in my career and in my life, and kind of develop my worldview a bit more as well, and just read and learn a lot about the things that I'm interested in. So once I get back from the scholarship, I feel like for a lot of people, it's kind of just being shot down this really fast, accelerating path of your career. I'm going to start a PhD after that, and that's kind of locked in for a good number of years. And then there's a pretty, a pretty strong momentum going forward beyond that. So this has offered a good opportunity to take some time before that.
Yeah, I had a very similar mode of thinking and reasoning when I was choosing to apply for this. And as a rising senior, I wasn't really ready to dive straight into a PhD and felt I wanted some more time to explore different research interests. And I had also had some time abroad in New Zealand that made me want to go. spend some more time abroad in a different part of the world. And so it just seemed like a really good option. And I kind of viewed it as a neat gap year abroad research experience, less of graduate school, but more like a time to just explore new things and get some traveling in. And yeah, one thing I heard the director of Churchill once describe it as a post-bac postdoc, with kind of this idea that it's this year to explore and yeah, not necessarily be on this accelerated track, as Amar was saying.
Yeah, I would definitely echo a lot of those sentiments, with the addition that being that I jumped straight from bachelor into my PhD at Cambridge, I definitely, in retrospect, definitely would have liked to have that post-bac postdoc, as Zoe described. But my motivation for coming to the UK and kind of diving right in head first was really like Amar was saying, sort of the or maybe it was Aaron was saying, the world-class research that, you know, it was present in my field in the UK. Not to say that the US didn't have that, but there was just a unique kind of alignment of all sorts of different people working on things I was interested in, and a lot of them just happened and still are remain at Cambridge. So that was really my main motivation for coming, was this was where the research was being done.
I had very similar thoughts to what's been said already. I was pretty burnt out at the end of my BS/MS program at U Chicago, and I wanted to have a chance to take a step back and assess what's important and meet people in different areas. I think if I got straight from my undergraduate PhD, I would have just had a very narrow mindset. And yeah, I wanted to travel and see a new part of the world. I never really spent much time in Europe before. So those are all attractive reasons. At the same time, though, I think I knew that my chances of getting a fellowship like this were pretty small, which is, you know, true for anyone. And so I think I approached the application process as a chance to learn more about myself, about what's important, and to kind of clarify my own thinking.
And Cody, I saw that you had to jump out for a moment, but is there anything else you would like to add?
Sorry, I lost service for a second. Are we still on the why go to the UK for school question? Yeah, sure. I'll add one thing, which is something that someone told me, which is if you do one of these cool fellowships, it just gives you the benefit of the doubt for the rest of your life. So you can take risks and try having sort of major impacts in risky or interdisciplinary areas with that kind of institutional support, which I think is really worth it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for sharing. We'll move on to just ask, what was the transition like for those of you who have been to the UK? What was the transition to the UK like? Were there any big surprises for you? Is there anything kind of major that stood out to you that you kind of want to like pass on to future scholars that to kind of help prepare them for that transition?
I can kick it off again. So the biggest thing for me was like something I was really not prepared for was the weather. Like I'd heard stories about how England's a bit gloomier, but I grew up in Florida, which is the sunshine state, so I'm used to like sunshine 24/7, 365. And when I came over there during the winters, it was pretty hard for me to just see clouds every day and not see the sun. So that was a big thing that for me at least, I mean, I'm sure some people who came from like maybe the Northeast are more used to that, but for me that was a big thing. And then also the food, uh, it seemed like they value quality, and this is like all just my personal experience, but it seemed like they value quality over quantity, whereas in America they value quantity for quality. So it's depending on what kind of person you are. That's a good or a bad thing. I like to eat a lot, and I'm not really that like don't care about what I'm eating, which is not a great thing. But I didn't get to eat as much in the UK, so I did lose like quite a bit of weight in the first few weeks. But yeah, those are the two biggest, and not the two biggest things, but just two things that jump out to me.
One thing, oh, Cody, you go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I can't see and get the social cues. Okay, I'll say the best thing, which was the work-life balance is incredible. Probably a lot of us work really, really hard in undergrad, and then you go to the UK and suddenly 4:30, you've already had 2 tea breaks that day as well. So I didn't personally fit right in, but some of my friends who are from underrepresented groups in the UK had really, really bad experiences, just being constantly assumed to not be a student at the schools. And I think that's sort of a broad brush way of saying some of the worst moments my friends had in the UK were based on race.
Nick, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and I echo what Cody said as well. Just even just this past year, there's been an issue with how non-white students have been treated at Cambridge within the Gates cohort, and that it's a big international family of scholars, so definitely can echo that. Kind of in a similar vein, for anyone who's thinking of applying for a Gates Cambridge or a Rhodes or anything like that, going to Oxford or Cambridge or any of those older universities in the UK, the collegial system is a real culture shock from the way the US universities work. I know universities like Harvard and Rice in the US, they do have a collegial system, but in the UK, where it was created, it operates in a very strange way for postgraduates, for people who are studying for an MPhil or a PhD, because you're kind of a member of this quasi Harry Potter house. Maybe Aaron might be able to speak to that as well, and Zoe will soon see this. I'm at Churchill as well, Zoe, so I'll see you there. But it's sort of like the heart of your social life, but it's also where all of your academic, like your tutor is and your counselor and stuff like that. Where there's like a nurse on staff. That's where your accommodations through, and it kind of has every college kind of has its own culture. So that's very specific to Oxford and Cambridge, but a lot of these scholarships kind of funnel you that way. So that's just something to be aware of, that the actual like daily practice of university is very different in the UK at those types of universities. And other places like Lancaster and Durham, I think, have similar collegial systems. So just something to be aware of in that regard. In a slightly lighter note, I found that being a very gullible and also very kind of blunt person, I did not get British humor, and it took me about 6 months to really feel like I wasn't, just kind of upsetting all the people around me by not getting their jokes. So that's something also to be aware of. Americans are known as kind of a lot more wide-eyed and bushy-tailed compared to British people. So it's just something to be aware of going into it.
Well, on the topic of food raised by Aaron, I can say that I was surprised by how good or how easy it was to find good food in the UK. I feel like there's a reputation for having very bland food, and I did not find that to be the case for me. I will say that it was hard initially to kind of get used to being there. I spent time abroad before that, but visiting a place versus trying to live there feels very different. And it was kind of overwhelming in the first week or so, just to kind of figure things out and navigate this foreign culture. I will say though that I did arrive there knowing 31 other American Rhodes scholars who I met at the orientation in Washington just the week before. So it was helpful to be there with other people who I knew, to kind of share quirky British stories, to commiserate, compare notes. So I think very quickly I found a rhythm there. And the first few months, I was just like, every week was like lectures and dinners and concerts and social events. So because of that, it was easy to kind of get swept up in the social scene there. So.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. And that's something I will have to mark down, that it's a myth busted that the UK has bland, bad food. So glad to hear that. So moving on, kind of getting to the application nitty gritty. So the people who are most likely on this call are interested in getting some application tips, hearing kind of all the insider info. So I'll just start off by asking, like, what do you think is most important in applying for these fellowships? Are there any traits or anything that you think is important to come through an application whenever someone's kind of talking about themselves? Are there characteristics or qualities or any themes that you think are best to convey in an application to your specific program?
I could go first on this one. I think that the Churchill is kind of unique from these other fellowships in that it really focuses on research potential rather than other qualities, per se, like leadership and community involvement and things like that, which I guess might suit well to some Goldwater scholars. And so I think what's really important is showing what type of researcher you are and how you have really contributed to different research projects you've done and what new insights you've brought and how you've pushed the research forward throughout your time in undergrad and if you've done anything after that. And so, yeah, that really comes through in a personal statement that you write, as well as a research proposal for that year-long MPhil. And so I think that's mainly what differentiates the Churchill from these other opportunities.
I can jump in real quick. So the Marshall is a bit unique in that you can do your degree really anywhere in the UK on anything. So there's like a wide variety of things. And with that comes the challenge of finding a degree in the sea of different degrees that are available to you. But it also presents an opportunity for you to really, and this is not just true for the Marshall, this is true for all the different fellowships. Finding a program that fits you so you can answer the question like, why this program, why this university, why this professor, how have your past experiences prepared you for this, and how is this going to prepare you for your future experience? So linking that all together. And I think like that specificity is key whenever you're applying to these things, because they want to fund somebody who's really put thought into how this fits into the total picture. So I actually spent the most, like a significant portion of time thinking about which degrees, which universities, and actually reaching out to professors and building a rapport with some professors. So if you're going to do research with like if you're going to do a research degree, reaching out to different groups, asking if they have availability for taking on a master's student. And then in doing so, you're going to be able to get a relationship with the professor early on. You can even start to flesh out the project a little bit, and you can put that into your application. So by the time you apply and interview, you have a very specific project almost in mind. Even if the project doesn't end up being what you're going to do, you can already say that you already have somebody across the pond who's going to be able to take you. And the same is true to a lesser extent for even taught degrees, where you can reach out to the professors running them and make sure that what you're signing up for, what you're applying for, matches exactly with what is in reality the case. So those would be my biggest tips. If I could do it all over again or advise somebody to do something, it's really start to reach out in advance, think about these degrees in advance, and make sure that you know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that, Aaron. And then it's kind of to flip it from what Zoe was saying about the Churchill in particular, I think one of the, for the non-Churchill fellowships, one of the most valuable things, I think, outside of generally demonstrating your research aptitude, if you're going in as a researcher, presumably as a in our Goldwater Scholar cohort, I think it's really valuable to also be able to demonstrate that you have kind of a well-defined worldview and perspective on what you want to do, why you're passionate about it, and how you see that fitting into a broader picture. And also being able to defend that perspective that you have about your work or your field that you're interested in, particularly in the interviews, when you get a little bit more prodding about the plan that you're laying out and why you think it's important and why you should be funded to do it. So whether or not that's something that's going to evolve in the future, and it likely will, at the moment when you're applying, I think it's really valuable to have that very well thought out, something that you've reflected on a lot, kind of perspective and plan for what you're interested in and how you're going to move forward with it in the next couple of years through this UK fellowship. And then another thing I'd add for the Marshall Scholarship, I think in particular, but maybe for some of these other ones, is an emphasis on UK and US relations, The Marshall Scholarship, as some of you might know, is kind of based around this US-UK relationship thing. I think that's one of the defining traits of it. It was established by the UK government to thank George Marshall for the Marshall Plan that helped rebuild Europe after World War II. So a lot of the emphasis on taking these students from the US to the UK to help create connections in the UK, help establish a more relationship between the two countries and create transatlantic collaborations, connections, and a stronger relationship between the countries. So that element, I think, plays a lot into what specifically you're going to do in the UK. And I think what makes Marshall applications particularly strong is if you can articulate a good reason for why you need to go to the UK specifically to do this work. If there's something unique about the UK ecosystem for the type of work you want to do, the field you're in, or the specific university you're proposing to go to, and also how you can leverage that work that you do in the UK to create lasting connections between the two countries. So demonstrating some vision for, oh, when I come back to the US, I'm going to have some sort of collaboration between the US and the UK, or take concept that I gained from this UK specific area of research and apply it to a US context. Some ways that having some collaboration and interfacing between the two countries helps elevate the work you do and elevate the connection between the countries.
Yeah, I can speak to the Gates Cambridge specifically. And I think some of this is true for a lot of other fellowships as well, hopefully. Going back to what Aaron said about, doing the research, contacting people and building connections with a prospective program, kind of shopping around for one. That is something if you're considering doing any graduate education, that should be definitely one of the first things you do in general. So that's great advice. And I think with these fellowships, the other thing you want to do, if you've gone to the trouble to do that and really kind of try to build a connection, usually through email, maybe you'll be able to schedule a video call potentially. You want to build into the application the idea that this is like the perfect moment, the perfect place, the perfect time to work with these people, and to achieve your goals, you really need this particular connection. So kind of similar to what Amar was saying, but I know, for instance, with the Gates Cambridge specifically, what they want to know is, why would you come to Cambridge for this? When there are lots of other world-class universities, what is it about Cambridge specifically that makes you want to come here? And you can, what they're really looking for is to see that you've done that homework and you've built that connection already. The other kind of broader fellowship advice, because we've gotten lots of great specific advice already, that I would offer, and hopefully you all saw this with the Goldwater, you're all recipients of Goldwater, is to have as many people read it as possible. I mean, that's just a really simple tip, but as many professors, a prospective host, having them look through your research statement and stuff like that, getting all their perspectives on it. And also, your university will usually arrange this, but if you're at a smaller university and they don't have the resources, try to ask your fellowships or honors office for some kind of, mock interview type thing, because a lot of these, the Gates, I believe the Marshall as well, have an interview stage. And the interviews are quite strange. And I think they're unique to each scholarship. The Gates interview changes every year. It's a very strange format. And, you really kind of need to practice being asked tough questions on your feet. Like, why would you try that technique here? Or how would this actually contribute to building knowledge in the places you want it to change? So, kind of asking for as much support as you can through the process and advocating for yourself. That's something that you should definitely do if you're going to go for these fellowships.
I would definitely echo what's been said so far. That makes so much sense. I also want to say that at least in the case of the Rhodes and the Marshall, there's no model for a good Rhodes scholar or a good Marshall scholar. They're all so different. So I remember when I was applying, my school gave me examples from past years, and I read them and I was like, wow, these people are all were the editor of the newspaper, or the school newspaper, and they're the captain of the football team, and they started a nonprofit, and they have 2 patents, and they've done all the way more than I ever did. as a student. So, but like anyway, I still applied and I still got it. So like I think it just comes down to your character and your like kind of what they see in you, and there's no way to really predict that beforehand. So yeah, I think being sincere and authentic is really important. That they can really tell when you're not. Making sure that you want to spend a year in the UK and you know what that involves is really important. So yeah, I think that applies to all fellowships.
Hey, can I jump in real quick? So I know I already talked about this, but Nick said reminded me of something that I wanted to say, which is he was talking about having your writing reviewed by different people and doing mock interviews. I highly suggest using the GSC, the Goldwater Scholar community, as a resource, especially the Slack. Like there's a channel called UK Fellowships. So whenever I was going for the Marshall, UF, unfortunately, where I went to undergrad, they only had one past Marshall in the last like 10 years ago. So I didn't really have like that many people to draw on. So I talked to a lot of people, like Goldwaters, who are applying concurrently with me at the same time, and we like exchanged essays. And I also applied to a lot of Goldwaters who had won these things. I just like reached out and cold emailed, like cold messaged them on Slack, and everyone's like super nice and willing to help. You'd be surprised. So definitely like don't be shy and just reach out to people. And the worst thing could happen is they ignore you, and it's not that bad if they ignore you. Just find another. There's like so many Goldwater scholars in the Slack that you can just find someone else. So I highly recommend reaching out and finding mentors if you don't have mentors at your undergrad institutions.
Yeah, I would just like to echo that too. No one from Bowdoin had ever gotten the Churchill before, and so I didn't have anyone I could talk to about it. And in addition to the Goldwater community we have here, you can also look up on the Churchill website a list of everyone who's gotten the awards. And I just cold emailed the most recent Earth Sciences Churchill scholar out of the blue, and she was amazing and like talked to me and then read my application materials. And I just think never underestimate how kind people can be with helping other folks out with these types of things. And I'll also just echo what Aaron was saying at the beginning too about how important it is to reach out and formulate a plan. And actually, a big part of the Churchill application is writing a page-long research statement, a very specific proposal for what you want to do during that MPhil. And it's really key to identify an advisor who you think is a good fit and to talk to that advisor and read their papers and develop this research plan with them. And especially to have them read it and give you feedback. So it's kind of this joint plan for this year. And then the Churchill Foundation can really see that you've thought about this and you know what you're getting yourself into. And you have an advisor over there who's on board and willing to take you. So, and then the last thing I wanted to mention was that I think also kind of unique to Churchill is that there isn't really an interview stage. There is only a very brief conversation with the foundation president to make sure that basically that you're not a serial killer is literally what was said in the calls. So that's also kind of a difference to keep in mind.
Wonderful. Well, I think those are all really amazing insights. And I definitely want to emphasize that one of the things that I think I was most surprised about was just like how surprisingly tightly knit the Goldwater community is and how kind everyone has been. So yes, to everybody watching, please reach out to fellow Goldwater scholars like our wonderful panelists. So if we're kind of said our piece on this question, I'll move on to the next one. Any other last minute thoughts before we move on? Because these are wonderful insights.
I just wanted to ask real quick, you may at the end do this anyway, but I just wanted to say other panelists might agree. If people want to email me or anyone else, I mean, I'd be happy to share my email afterwards. So, Mina, maybe you can arrange that. But yeah, we're all, like Zoe said, we want people to come to the UK. So definitely reach out.
Yes, definitely. So yes, spoiler alert to everyone watching, we will send out a list of people who would be more than happy to answer any and all of your questions once we wrap up the webinar. So we will be hopefully connecting everybody. So yes, thank you, Nick.
Sorry for spoiling it.
No worries. It's hopefully it won't be a surprise that people in the community are kind and willing to talk to you. So yes, so we'll definitely make that list available to everyone. So just then the next question that I had was, how did you all choose your graduate lab, and what was the transition to graduate school work from undergrad like for you? Again, did you find any significant surprises? Was it strange not having like classes in research and just solely focusing on research? If you all wouldn't mind speaking to that.
Well, I guess maybe a rare Goldwater who went to the UK and didn't do research. So I'll, sorry, Aaron. I'll put my perspective in. First of all, to say that it's definitely feasible and possible to put forward a proposal for programs that are not lab-based or research-based, and even outside of the area that you did in undergrad. So I did chemical engineering in undergrad, and like I mentioned, I'm now doing, well, first year was an energy sociology program, and then this year, energy policy. So definitely outside of the engineering research area. And for me, something that was kind of surprising going into it was that the master's programs generally seem to be, from the scholars that I've heard from, lighter than you would probably expect in the US. So you end up having more time, especially more unstructured time that you're meant to be doing work during, but also just more time in general outside of the work that you have to do uh, to do whatever you really think is most valuable with that time, whether that be exploring the area, exploring other areas of interest intellectually, or just relaxing a little bit. So it's nice that there's a kind of more flexibility about how much you want to have your program and your study dominate what you do in your day to day. And yeah, I would say that I have enjoyed doing the kind of taught master's program side of things outside of doing research, and especially for me going into a PhD afterwards, probably for many of you who are planning on doing PhDs, if you're doing master's programs in the UK, it's definitely, like I mentioned at the very beginning, it's a good opportunity to learn something that's entirely different from what you're going to do in your PhD, and to come back and go further down in this more technical space of the PhD while having had this education and training in something that's complementary, that's outside of the specific science or engineering discipline that you're in, that can help inform the work you do and maybe allow you to think more broadly and cohesively about the place that your research fits into a broader social context or policy context in the world outside the lab.
Nick, you want to go?
Yeah, I guess I can hop in real quick. To the first question, because the second question, the first question regarding like how you choose a graduate course, I think that there's a bit there that can address the second bit. And for me, what I found really constructive, and where now at the end of my PhD, I think I had it right for myself anyway, was prioritizing, what kind of experience I wanted to have. And so from the beginning, I went in with the kind of expectation and desire to figure out what type of supervisor I was seeking out and what type I wanted, like what type of research supervisor worked for me. So like all of you on this call, you all have done research at this point. And even if you're undergrads and you don't think of yourself this way, you are researchers, like scholars, like the rest of us. And so you already have a much better understanding of research than you probably think you do. And you already know what you like and don't like about it. So going into your graduate school and program selection, whether it's through a UK fellowship or what have you, I would really encourage you to think about the sort of social personality side of it as much as the research, because figuring out the quality of the research and the you know, Amar was saying, you know, the sort of niche you're fitting in the social context and the broader intellectual context. To some degree, that's something you're really well trained to do. You've already started down that path anyway. But the bit that's going to be harder is to assess, you know, like what kind of person do I want to spend a year, or in my case, 4 years working with in another country. And that can be hard to do. But there are a couple, for me, the thing I really wanted to get right was that I like having a hands-off supervisor personally. I like being independent, doing my own research, guiding myself, and going to them when I need help, sort of on my terms. And you know, when you talk to people who do research, you know, there's sort of you sort of have two archetypes of a supervisor. You kind of have like a phantom supervisor who's never around and is often stressing out the student by not being there to support them, or a helicopter supervisor who's like, you know, you have daily or weekly meetings, you have all these deadlines that they set, you know, you are a member of their lab, you're not an independent researcher. You know, so helicopter versus phantom. And I wanted something more on the phantom side, but not so much that they weren't there. You know, I wanted to be able to check in with them. And so based on sort of my early interactions with people, when like Aaron mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, you know, when you're reaching out to these people, when you're cold calling them and trying to build these relationships, you can learn a lot about a person by how quickly they respond to emails, by how engaged they are with your application, by how constructive their comments are. By just the general tone. If you manage to have a video call with them, you can learn a lot even through Zoom about like what kind of person they are. And most critically, you should 100% email every single person in the lab that you can get an email of. You know, current students, postdocs, talk to them and say, you know, I want to work with you for a year, 3 years, 4 years. You know, what's it like in your lab? And try to get, and you know, if you, especially if you're able to get them on a video call, they will be honest. I mean, I am when people reach out to me. And you know, I'll tell them the good and the bad. It's mostly good, don't worry. But it's, you know, that's really, I guess, yeah, my biggest advice would be to really think about how you as a person are going to work in the program. Because the academics are going to fall where they will. If you get one of these fellowships, you're good, but you want to make sure you're happy when you're doing it. So definitely don't underplay this personality side of things, because that's where a lot of these things can go wrong.
Thank you all so much. And Erin, if you want to hop on and give your thoughts, I think after this, we'll probably wrap things up and move on to the Q&A section, just so we can get to as many questions as possible. So I think that'll be the plan.
No, it's okay. We can go straight to the Q&A. My thoughts weren't, Nicholas kind of covered everything, so I don't need to add anything more.
Sounds great. Yes, I think we got some very good coverage on that question. So I'll first move to ask a question that we got just before the webinar. And the first question that I'll direct, I'll just kind of direct it to Zoe and to Aaron, was how did you craft your personal statements? Is there, other than just having people review it, how did you kind of go through the thought process of, you know, what do I put into this?
Yeah, Zoe, go ahead.
Okay. I think it's really important to think about the trajectory that you've been on and how this program that you're applying for is ultimately, you know, the perfect next step for where you need to go. And so I think it's really important to describe where you've been, and especially for the Churchill, like describe these contributions that you've made so they can kind of see who you are as a researcher. You know, and show how excited you are and how passionate you are, and then ultimately intertwine some details that lead you to the end to be like, and yes, this is the next step that I need to take for my career, and this is how this Churchill scholarship will make that possible for me. And yes, of course, having as many people read it as possible, I think is pretty important.
My biggest suggestion is make it interesting. I think my first early drafts were really boring. I mean, they were like technically sound, but we're not writing academic papers, right? Like a personal statement is like just that, it's personal. So you want your personality to come through. And usually people don't have boring personalities. So you don't want to have a boring personal statement. I actually took a few risks with my personal statement. Just because, like, risks in that, like, I wouldn't have felt comfortable submitting to this for like a academic publication or something. And it wasn't completely professional. I mean, it was of course like always professional, but like I just showed a little bit more of myself than I might have done otherwise. And I think that actually ended up helping out. So doing that, I think, helps a lot. Just make it interesting, because you want the reader to actually want to read your personal statement. They're reading these things like all day long, like hundreds of them. And you don't want to stick out in a bad way. But you just want to like show who you are. And if they don't like who you are, then like that's fine. Like that just wasn't meant to be. But I'm sure they're gonna like who you are. Like most people like people. So that'd be my biggest suggestion.
I would also add one last thing is that I think that not before, but after you have a good initial draft of your own materials, it can be helpful to read past successful applications and kind of see what they've done. And if some things stick out to you, try to implement those same kind of techniques in your essays. But I think it is important to do it after you have your own initial drafts where your voice comes through.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question is, how did you prepare for your interviews? So I'll direct this question to Amar and to Cody, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, I can go first. So I think by far the most important thing is to practice speaking out loud answers to questions. So first, write down a long list of all the questions you think you might face from your resume, personal statement, and research statement. Then second, ideally get friends or colleagues to do mock interviews with you. And if you can't do that, or in addition, literally just like walk around your room and like read the question, then speak out loud the answer and time how long it takes you. And you'll be amazed at how quickly you improve.
That's a pretty good summary of it. I think practice is a huge part of the preparation. I definitely feel like if I just went straight into my Marshall interview when I was first starting out preparing, I would not have done nearly as well as I did after a lot of the preparation I did. And the practice pays off pretty quickly, I'd say as well. One thing I'd say is definitely think out questions that you'll get based on your application. Like Cody said, that's a huge part of it. For some scholarships more than others, you also will want to think through potential weakness points in your application or the whole plan or vision that you're presenting, places where you think the interviews might try to poke holes or press you a little bit more, challenge your thinking, and be prepared for those sorts of questions and how you're going to defend your stance or rebut the points that the interviewers are trying to push you on. That can be really helpful when they try to have some gentle prodding. And also a lot of the time, especially for me being in climate, I felt like I was responsible for any sort of climate related question, even though I was applying as an engineer researcher. It kind of feels like it's just anything's fair game. And I think that might be the case for a lot of different areas, that you will want to be able to understand a lot of the dynamics outside of your research in that area. I think climate's a particularly broad one that you probably get held responsible for more than you might for other fields. Like, how do you deal with climate deniers sort of question? I'm doing sustainable energy research. So that is something to think about in terms of ways you can get pressed or different directions that your questions could go in. And yeah, definitely having mock interviews with as many people as you can. And sometimes if there are certain points you want to get across, there's one actually, probably the last thing I'll say that's I think important. Think through maybe 5 points that you think that you need to get across in the interview, that when you walk out, you want the interviews to know these things about you or to have heard these things from you one way or another. And then when you're getting questions in the interview, think of ways that you can bring those in. Try to be proactive about getting across the message that you want to, as opposed to just responding directly to the questions that you get and not directing towards the most important piece of information or comments that you want to get across. So thinking through those ahead of time is really important. And for some of the more important ones, it's even, I think, potentially helpful to rehearse a little bit what you want to say or how you want to say a small amount of the key points to be as articulate as you can. You don't want to come across over rehearsed where you're just reciting something. But if you think through a little bit how you want to phrase certain things that are really important to your application or who you are, and then bring those out when the time comes for a small subset of things you're going to say ultimately in the interview, I think that can be really helpful as well.
Wonderful. Thank you to you both for those insightful responses. And then we have a question here from Cade saying, and I'll direct this to Sam and to Nick, how supported did you feel or have you felt in your fellowship program and institution?
Given that I'm at the end of it, I think I've managed to kind of see it for all its shape. And I mean, the Gates community at Cambridge specifically is really quite a wonderful community. I know we actually do stuff with Marshall scholars as well. So I'm sure there's a lot of similarities, I'm sure, with the other communities. But Gates, like Marshall, there are MPhils and there are PhDs. It's one of those types of programs as well, just centered at Cambridge. So there's a range of people who are seeking a range of different experiences involved. And there's much like Goldwater, like we're here today, there's a student council that sort of organizes a lot of the events in the community. And the trust is overseen, has kind of its own independent budget within Cambridge to offer its own events, its own programming. And most valuable for me is sort of the professional development funds and the conference funds that they make available. So from sort of like a very sort of financial standpoint, the fellowship community, the fellowship itself is very generous. And when you add to that the community, people in all disciplines from all over the world, pursuing a range of different degrees and sort of end goals for their career, all sort of mingling in the same location, 100 or so every year in each cohort. That's a really special kind of community to be a part of. And I think a lot like these other scholarships, you start off with an orientation, which kind of helps you get your feet wet in the new culture in the UK. So COVID has obviously disrupted that from where it has been in the past 20 years. But for Gates, we take all the new Gates scholars fresh off the plane, essentially, to the Lake District, which is a really beautiful part of the UK. My fellow UK fellows might be able to speak to that if they've been. And we spend a couple days tramping around in the wilderness and, hanging out in pubs and just having a great time on the whole. So I would say in my experience, the community's been very supportive. And yeah, I would recommend Gates to anyone specifically. I can't speak to other ones, but I would say definitely Gates is great in that respect.
Yeah, I would say for Rhodes, the support is there if you want it and if you ask for it. So like, I think for me, I'd say I got most of my support from my department and my lab, and I felt very well supported there. But I thought that if I needed it, I could have reached out more to the Rhodes community for broader support. I didn't really know anybody who was doing my program, but I felt like I certainly could have gotten advice had I asked for it. I did meet every quarter or every term with the warden of Rhodes House, just to kind of check in and see how I was doing. So it was good to have that as well. But I think more importantly, the Rhodes community is just so broad, and people have experience in such a variety of different areas that since then I've been able to email people to ask for their advice on different topics, and it's very easy to connect with people and hear their thoughts and collaborate and kind of get support that way too. So I think the opportunity is really there if you seek it out.
Wonderful. And I see that we are getting close to our 7 p.m. time. If our panelists have the time, and if you're willing to stay on the call, we can definitely keep going with some questions, but I also want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So would anybody be willing to stay on, or would you all need to head out?
I'll have to jump off in a couple minutes, but don't want to ruin everyone else's party, so you guys can stay on.
Yeah, same with me. I'll have to leave soon because I have a flight to prepare for tomorrow morning, but I can stand for a couple more minutes.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, well then we'll just kind of probably try and hit maybe just a couple more questions and then wrap things up for this evening. So I'll just open this question up to, let's see, to anybody who's willing. We'll probably try and stick to about 2 to 3 people's thoughts. But one of the questions we got was, how do people in your program transition into a PhD from or into the US? So after they complete, a master's in your program, if applicable, how do they then transition into the PhD world here back in the US?
I'm happy to start on this one. So I applied my second year at Oxford in the fall. And I made the unconventional choice to travel to the US before applying, to meet professors and talk about the research and see if they were a good fit for me. Some professors were really receptive to that and then happy to meet me. Others were like confused about what I was doing, because usually, you would apply and then you travel to the schools that you're accepted to for the visit weekends. But that's harder to do if you live, across the Atlantic Ocean. So I had a very good experience doing it that way. I was able to really refine my applications through my conversations, and also to cross some schools off my list that I decided were not such a good fit for me. One thing to keep in mind too is that for some American fellowships like the NSF, GFRP, your years in Oxford count against your quota for years before which you can't apply for the fellowship. So it's important to factor that into your thinking and keep that in mind, and maybe use that to decide when or if to apply.
Yeah, just to quickly add on that last point Sam made, the timing of the NSF is a weird one. You can apply if you're, let's imagine a typical, you're a senior in undergrad, you're applying to UK fellowships, and otherwise you would do a PhD right after undergrad. You can apply to the NSF at the same time as you're applying to these other ones. And if you get a UK fellowship, you go off for 2 years and you get the NSF in that same cycle. You can just put the NSF on the 2 years where you're on reserve and not receiving money out of the 5-year term of the NSF. So you have 3 years to spend 5 years to spend the money in 5 years. So you use the 2 years of on reserve while you're on this fellowship, and you come back and you use the first 3 years of funding in your first 3 years of PhD, and that works out pretty well. You could also apply right after your first year of the UK fellowship, but I believe you're not allowed to apply once you have a master's degree. So that gets more complicated. So if you wait off too long, you might become ineligible. I applied in my senior year, and that has worked out pretty well. That might be what I recommend if you're planning on doing a UK fellowship.
Any other thoughts on this question before we move on?
Yeah, I'll just say I had the same question when I was applying, because for these MPhils at Cambridge, and I'm sure it's probably similar at other schools, but technically it says they end on September 30th because you start October 1st. And I was like, well, how is that going to work if I need to start a PhD in like probably August or even earlier? And it turns out that apparently most people actually wrap up their thesis and finish up in mid-August of that year. So the timing actually works out okay.
I also know people who defended like after they started their PhD in the US, so that's also possible too.
Wonderful. All right. And we'll move on to one more question that is probably on the minds of current applicants. Do you have any thoughts on how COVID has impacted the application cycle? And do you have any recommendations for people who are applying to research-based fellowships who may not have been able to go into labs or were impacted by COVID in any way. Have you heard anything from your program about how they're going to, change the way they evaluate applicants because of the pandemic?
I'm gonna have to hop off now, but thank you, everyone. It's been a great conversation, and thanks, Mina, for organizing this.
Thank you so much for being here.
All right, bye-bye.
Have a good night.
I'll just make two quick comments on that question. One is we all understand the huge impact of COVID, and the evaluators absolutely take that into account in terms of your productivity, what you did. They don't want to only select rich kids who are able to afford certain experiences during the pandemic. And the second thing that really matters is having a really good internet connection for the interview, because we are all human and it's very hard to feel as excited about a candidate if you're having trouble understanding what they're saying. So try to use your school Wi-Fi or an Ethernet.
Yeah, I'll add that the Churchill added a question to their application specifically about COVID and how it's impacted you, and kind of a place for you to describe any time spent or opportunities lost or anything like that because of the pandemic.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think that that's been kind of an elephant in the room for a lot of applicants this year. So thank you all for your thoughtful responses, and fingers crossed to everyone who's applying. So I'm just going to do a quick check-in with the chat. If anyone has any last minute questions, we'll go ahead and take them now. I'm just going to double check to make sure I haven't missed anyone. Okay, I think that's it. Well, I think that just about wraps up our conversation this evening. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of your insights. Thank you to everyone who is watching live or watching this recording later on. And we will definitely send out everyone's names. We'll send out a list of names of people who would be great contacts for these fellowships for any current applicants or future applicants. And we thank you again so much for joining us, and have a lovely evening, everyone.